This video contains spoilers of the CODOTVERSE podcast. If you want to go listen to it for yourself, please leave this video and go enjoy it. If you're too curious, carry on. Batman. One of the most popular comic titles in all of history. When you're a detective that dresses up like a bat and goes into the night to stop a bunch of slapstick villains with various gimmicks, you can't help but allow that alone to pull in your interest, especially when it comes to media like this. There's comics, movies, TV shows, and in very recent years, podcasts that surround the Caped Crusader and his nefarious enemies. Now, I wouldn't consider myself much of a podcast listener. I don't actively look for them when I'm bored. I just throw on some tunes and I call it a day. I love my music. But when Batman Unburied came out, I was in the prime of my freshly new Batman hyperfixation. And lo and behold, I loved the podcast overall. I could not stop talking about it to my friends. I kept urging them to listen to it. I was having a jolly old time. So we're talking about the voice acting choices of Batman Unburied and how wonderful they are. And then this topic is brought up into conversation. My friend said, the voice acting in the CODOTVERSE is also pretty good. And I said, the CODOTVERSE? And so I ran to YouTube to try and find anything on it, and I couldn't. And I said, I can't find anything about this. So my friend sent me a Tumblr link, and that's how I found out about the CODOTVERSE. And then I had completely forgotten about it months later. While I was mentally preparing myself for finals week and, building my playlist to have some of those tunes to jam to at 2 a.m., I stumbled across The Rogues, the podcast. And lo and behold, CODOT's name was right under the title. Kato, why are you telling us about this? Well, I'm here to tell you my full experience of binging the entirety of the Rogues podcast in a 24-hour time frame under crunch time during finals at university. Ladies, gentlemen, non-binary friends, I give you this quickly put together video essay on the CODOTVERSE. Now, before I delve into my personal experience listening to this podcast, I would like to talk about some of the backstory behind it. The CODOTVERSE is a fan-made Batman/DC universe series of audio plays written by Canadian voice actor husband and wife Team CODOT, also known as Voice Boss and D on Tumblr. In 2012, a character blog for character Edward Nygma was created to solely answer questions from curious eyes. It was known as the Riddler's Case Files.
Ariel Squid asks, so, how did you get out this time? It involved a rock hammer, a poster of Rita Hayworth, and many, many years. Wait, that's not right. No. I escaped on a makeshift raft. Oh, that's not it either. Oh, it involved digging 3 separate escape tunnels. Come on, I'm not telling you.
At about 101 entries, there were storylines starting to expand. The character constantly making references to how he was still reading a blog while answering questions, while said storyline was continuing.
Waylon, could you possibly do me one more favor? What was that? Could you read me one of my questions to answer? Really? You want me to do it? Of course. I'm not supposed to read while driving anymore, and questions keep my brain active, so it would be a tremendous help to me.
We had characters like the Joker, Harley Quinn, and notably Jonathan Crane come in. And boy, does it get interesting. So in my experience of first listening to this podcast, I would say it was about 10 o'clock at night. And I was like, fuck it, it's time, I gotta get my finals done. Bam! Play the first episode. It's the Riddler, basically answering questions from the blog.
Have a Baby asks, so, Mr. Riddler, do you have any other hobbies aside from making up riddles? Well, riddles are not so much a hobby as an occupation. Or maybe a symptom. But do you really care what I do with my spare time? You think perhaps that I do needlepoint of die, bat, die, or bless this mess? Knit my own escape ropes? Be that asshole who completes all the crosswords at the library and gets real pedantic about their Dewey Decimal System? Okay, that last one? That one might be true.
And just to give you all a little taste of how it went, I'd like to share my live reaction with you. Now, how did I capture this live reaction, you may ask? I sent a couple of voice messages via Instagram to my friends in a group chat at me reacting to every little tidbit of me basically going insane. It is 12 o'clock at night at this point, so please excuse the crunchy audio, but here you go.
I think that there's a fan-made Rogues podcast on Spotify, and I'm gonna listen to it to get through this. I hit play after recording that message, and the first thing I hear is, people can't stop talking about your ass. There's lore now in this podcast. I don't know what's happening. John just turned his fear toxin into cocaine. You can't make this shit up.
And this is just the early stuff. This is the early stuff of what's to come.
Riddler just sarcastically referred Jonathan as a real Georgia peach. I'm actually gonna die. I hate living in Georgia. Punching the air. Crying. Wet sobbing. Passed out on the ground. Choking, screaming.
I said a couple of things in text because my roommate was asleep one room over, so I had to try and keep myself quiet, but holy shit. The sobbing, laughing I endured while surviving on 2 Monster energy drinks and hearing the amount of shit Jonathan was ordering at a Waffle House broke me. Going off script to just ask every viewer out there, guess which character is my favorite from this podcast. I don't think none of you are aware which character I like from this podcast in particular. I don't think I've made it very clear. Going on to the main part of the video, the storylines feature audience participation, where whenever episodes would come out, the audience would try and answer questions or make certain choices, changing a lot of the storyline to be in its current direction. Now, how this first veered into a story-driven type of sense had to be when the Joker infiltrated Riddler's case file tapes.
The bad guys are always hotter, asks Mr. Riddler. Mr. Riddler, my friend Dominique has had a major crush on you. Did you hear that? What is that?
Coming in and knocking him out with a crowbar, with, of course, Harley being at his side, saying that he was taking over the blog for a short period of time and answering questions on Ed's behalf. These episodes were titled Joker Time, and basically for every single question that was answered, Ed would be met with a crowbar. I wonder what that makes you think of. The time frame of this happens within a month. Joker states this in Joker Time number 3, where Joker just simply says it's been a rough month for Eddie and he won't be answering questions in the episode. In Joker Time number 4, we are introduced to Jonathan Crane and Lex Luthor, who rescue Edward from the Joker's clutches.
Surprised. I never thought you'd ever let your hands get dirty.
Oh, Joker. You of all people should know I never get my own hands dirty.
Looks like I have a new test subject.
Mr. Nigma, I suggest you hold your breath.
Jonathan using his fear toxin to intoxicate the Joker, causing him to pass out. They get Edward down from his binds, and he is blind in one of his eyes. Now, this is where the episodes start to take a turn, an episodic turn where a lot of things are mentioned previously. Though this happens already in the questions that were already answered, of course, this starts to become more repetitive. Earlier in the podcast, Riddler is asked a question about his comic versions or his video game versions. Of course, people stumbling across the blog and thinking that he is what that version is. But he goes on to say that he is his own self, and that the person asking the question has been reading too many comic books or playing too many video games.
Addison of the Black Note asks, I'm sorry, but I was a little disappointment in the placement of the Riddler trophies in Arkham City. They seem to be pretty easy to spot, and more often than not were out in the open. Was this intentional? Did you try to maybe make things a little easier for Batman? I felt you did such a nice job with them in Arkham Asylum, and then lowered the bar in Arkham City. Is this a real question? You're talking about a series of video games. That wasn't me. I was never asked, or tasked, if you like, to create anything for those games.
Hearing him answer that question personally, and then looking at the episode titles such as Lazarus Pit, Illness, was making me lose my shit. During this time, he has made a deal with Lex Luthor, which is ensuring him of, quote, protection, end quote, when really it's just controlling him from afar. Ed breaks away from this type of power, or so we think. And then we are introduced to Jonathan Crane's tapes. Now his tapes are just notably him doing his research on fear, but as more tapes and more answers start to come out through the blog, people start to speculate that Mr. Nigma is not himself, to say the least. There are a lot of out-of-character things, especially one notable moment where he fails to answer a riddle.
Here's one. Ambiguous Traveler said, Twin of gold, you can dip me and mold me. Race me against my kind, I'll always, I last the longest, but finish last. Well, go ahead, riddle it as you shoot it down. Well, that's just terrible. Painfully easy. It's, oh, it was just in my head. God, what a dumb riddle. It's, you know what? I'm not even going to justify this with an answer.
Jonathan in particular makes a tape to the audience stating that there is something clearly amiss and that something needs to be drawn out to reveal the truth.
Something is wrong here. Very troubling. Has anyone noticed that Edward Nigma's latest posts are a little on the nose? The man has an acerbic personality at the best of times, but there's something amiss.
And so, this leads the audience and Jonathan to seek out 10 riddles to try and find Edward. This brings me back to the audience participation mentioned earlier in the video. The way this story trails off to when it comes to decisions by the audience starts to make great impact on the storytelling as a whole. For example, there is a moment where Jonathan is trapped in a room, and if he does not escape in time, he will most likely die. So the audience members have to tell him what to do in order for him to get out safely. This also goes for the riddles that Jonathan must answer in order to save Edward, and if 3 of them are wrong, Edward dies. I am very aware of the GCPD plot in the middle of these episodes, but of course my brain starts to pick up a little more as I hear that Jonathan is Edward's therapist, so I was just sitting there and going, oh, this'll be fun. This is also the moment where I learned about Icky.
Little Icky. Surely she can't be the same Icky.
She is.
But that would make her,
33.
Good Lord. Hello, Icky. I'm taking her out of the cage.
Please don't.
I took her out of the cage.
My heart, and this is unfortunately the part where I remembered that Edward in the show Gotham sniffs Kristen Kringle.
Mr. Nigma.
Hello, Miss Kringle.
Thank you for reminding me of that, CODOT. We are given more in-depth conversation and intel about how Jonathan's fear toxin works. We are introduced to Poison Ivy. We are introduced to the Robins. Oh, just so much going on. Professor Pig is introduced as one of Jonathan's new patients, and while this is all happening, Edward reveals that Echo and Query exist in this universe with him, and he even gets one of them to come onto the microphone and say, quote, something, end quote, into the phone.
I don't know. Just say something. Hold on, I gotta put you on speaker. All right, Query, let them have it.
Something.
Oh, isn't she a pip?
I enjoy this side of the Rogues we get to see in this podcast. I love that it just surrounds them. It's all about them. Sure, it's always good to have, the star, Batman, feature in his own, Batman comic type of deal. But whenever we get anything on the Rogues, it feels like it's not enough. And I love that this entire podcast really centers around them. Now, where the story is currently taking place, I have voice message reactions for those. I'll share one of them to show my reaction when I got to the very end.
I'm going crazy right now. I'm so upset with how it's left off. There's no way to see when it'll be updated, and it is so agonizing. Just rip my heart out and stomp on it with spiky boots. And then there's an entire episode that's like an hour long that's not related to the plot. I have yet to listen to that because I'm still driven on the main plot, and I'm like, why?
The next thing on my listen list is Murder in the House of Mystery, which is a Halloween event that is an hour long that I believe supposedly includes all of the Rogues in it. I don't know. I only heard a tiny tidbit of it. As I'm looking to this video in editing, I feel like this video essay needs a part 2. And that is something I will have to plan and do because there is so much more that I want to talk about. And I don't want the video to make it to like a 30-minute thing and then for people to just be like, oh my god, you made a 30-minute video, I'm not watching it! So until the day comes that I release a part 2 of this video essay onto my channel, go listen and cherish the Rogues podcast. It is so good. I highly recommend it. This is more so a new thing I'm trying. I've never really done one of these videos before, and I would love to do them more often since I enjoy watching them in the first place. So yeah, I guess this concludes the video. Thank you Team CODOT for sharing this wonderful thing with the world. I am looking forward to what else is to come to it. And I hope you all have a good day, and I'll talk to you all later. Trying to find that one part where he goes, bitch, I'm hilarious.
You're making fun of me, aren't you?
I wouldn't dream of it.
Oh my god. Is this it?
You're not funny. You think you are, but you're not.
Bitch, I'm hilarious.